So I think that's how I really do that, is setting those boundaries, finding those things that are enjoyable, and taking time to rest.
5 years old, guys, getting these back-to-back suspensions. Like, this is
Yes.
what really pisses me off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I am your host, Maria Davis Pierre, licensed mental health counselor and the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. Today, I am here with Dr. Destiny Huff, who is a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD military spouse and the mother of two neurodivergent children. As a licensed mental health therapist and non-attorney special education advocate, she empowers families to navigate the special education system with confidence. Dr. Huff sits on the board of PDA North America and Sisters with Awesome Children, championing the rights and well-being of neurodivergent learners. She specializes in equipping parents to advocate effectively at the IEP table while also training schools and organizations to create neuroaffirming, inclusive environments. With a strong focus on mental health, Dr. Huff is committed to dismantling shame-based educational practices and fostering approaches that uphold student agency and emotional well-being. Her work bridges the gap between mental health and education, ensuring that neurodivergent learners receive the respect, support, and accommodations necessary to thrive both academically and emotionally in and out of the classroom. Enjoy today's episode with Dr. Huff. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I have a very special guest here today, Dr. Destiny Huff, who is a continued speaker on all things autism in Black events. So I'm pretty sure you guys recognize her. So happy to have you here, Dr. Destiny.
Yes, happy to be here.
So you bring so many layers to the conversations surrounding being Black and autistic. Like myself, you are a therapist, you are an autistic Black woman, and you're raising autistic children. I really want to start with what led you into this work and how has your own diagnosis shaped the way that you support others?
Yeah, so I have always wanted to work with children and adolescents. So in my mental health career, that's always where all of my training was geared towards. And I didn't realize how that would help me later advocate for my own child. So early on, I did trauma training and became a certified trauma therapist for children. And when my oldest son entered into the public school system undiagnosed, I always tell everyone we saw anxiety, we saw black or white thinking. Again, me being a mental health professional, I was very keen on the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell people you have to grow and learn. You have to recognize your own bias, your own stereotypes. And I had a very stereotypical view of how autism presented. And so my son entered into a public school that was predominantly white because we were military. So this wasn't necessarily a choice. This is where he was going to go. And I always tell people his teacher was phenomenal. Like, she really worked with us and tried to work with us and later confirmed things that we were thinking. And he went through 3 teachers in 1 year. Because they left the district because it was that bad. And so it started off with disciplinary reports, write-ups. We were like, hey, does he need a behavior plan? Does he need an IEP? Me not really knowing these terms yet. Even though I had worked in the school system, I had worked as a mental health professional supporting school staff. So it was like a contractor in that space. That wasn't my space, and it wasn't a special education. And so the long and short of it is we returned from winter break, and after 3 back-to-back suspensions in 2 weeks, my husband went to the superintendent and essentially was like, you guys are not going to kick my kid out. And I reached out to a Black clinical and educational psychologist and was like, left a voicemail crying, essentially just saying like, I need help, I need support for my child, for my family. The first time she met our child, and after I told her everything that was going on with school, had been going on for those months, how he'd always been in a structured setting because he'd been in daycare since he was 6 weeks old. So he's not new to social situations and things like that. She said, Mom and Dad, do you all think he's autistic? And thus began my advocacy journey, my rabbit hole, and me finding autism in Black.
Now, I need you to repeat his age that he was in these back-to-back suspensions.
Okay, so he was 5 years old during these back-to-back suspensions. He was 5 years old. And when he got his official diagnosis of autism, he was 5 years old. And the school actually, when they go, so for parents that don't know, when they go to say, okay, we did the evaluation, these are the categories we're considering for eligibility for special education. She actually had the autism category and the speech or the developmental delay category available to present to us, because our son, we don't use functioning labels, but he is what you would consider quote unquote high functioning. His official diagnosis is level 1, and he has a lot of verbal language. And so, but then as we're going through it, they're like, oh, his language is so great and this and that, and he can't be autistic because he speaks. And we were like, what? So he ended up getting the developmental delay category, and then we moved, thankfully, because it was time for us to move anyway, and we got him reevaluated by the next school. They really took in what we were saying, and he got his correct category of autism. So
5 years old, guys, getting these back-to-back suspensions. Like, this is
yes.
what really pisses me off. I just got to be honest, because what is a 5-year-old doing that is just causing y'all to really do, like, they're not doing that much. Like, if you're not able to redirect and put in supports and do with a 5-year-old, you're already letting me know you're the problem. The child is 5.
And
What do you expect for a 5-year-old to do?
and just add some context to this. So again, going back to, yes, he's 5, and he's been in childcare since he was 6 weeks old. And he's never been aggressive towards staff. He's never been aggressive, right? Because that's the terminology used when they're dysregulated. He's never been aggressive, quote unquote, towards peers. And even as we're like, does he need A, B, C, D, and E before winter break, right? No. Why? Because he is what I call your classically compliant child. He's high masking.
Yeah.
And so to them, and we didn't see it, right? Because we thought they were trying to help. But essentially what they were saying was he doesn't need those things because he's choosing to do these things. And when he wants to do better, he can do better. So no, he doesn't need an evaluation. No, he doesn't need a behavior plan. No, he doesn't need extra support. And later, and now, years later, and after that year, I began to learn that, which is what led me on my advocacy journey. But during that time, we thought we're really supporting our child, and really it was them slowly, honestly, building a case to put him out.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Similar story of how they tried to push our son out, but they started at 3, 4 with him, of trying to push him out and saying the school can't support him and things of that nature. And this is what they do with our Black children daily. And it's unfortunate. I had a case where they suspended a 4-year-old, and he wasn't even the one that was the aggressor. He was reacting to an action that was done to him. And when the mom went to advocate, the principal said, well, the other student is just a child. Honey, they're the same age. And that is adultification at work with our children.
I would have went off now. If you just a child, you're not talking about a grown person. You're talking about 2 children.
2 4-year-olds. 2 4-year-olds.
Babies. I call them babies when they're that age.
Like, and that's just really what we're out here dealing with. And as a non-attorney advocate and therapist, there's both emotional and logistic weight that parents carry in these IEP spaces. What are some top things you really want Black parents, the listeners, to know when navigating special education?
I think the first thing is that the school is not the expert. There are many times where I go into these IEP meetings, and mind you, I've been in this special education space now for like 5 years now, I want to say, something like that, 3 to 5 years. And I have more knowledge and information about the special education piece and the law, and I'm not an attorney, and how that applies and what that looks like than some of the people in the meeting. So I think as Black and brown parents, we are constantly made to feel like we don't have valuable input and insight, and that they are the experts. So we kind of step in there, and we've been told to placate, and we've been told, don't be too loud and don't be too aggressive when we're just being assertive. So that's one. They're not the experts. 2, I constantly have Black and brown parents who reach out to me, and the language they use about their own children because of the language that the school is using about their children.
Mm-hmm.
Stop letting them speak about your children like that.
Mm.
Because what's happening is you're so emotional and dysregulated and frustrated in the moment that when they're saying it, let's just be honest, you're defaulting to, why can't they just do what they're supposed to do? Why can't you just not call me? Why can't this and this happen? Like every parent has that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take a step back and realize that you are your child's only advocate for all 13 years of their educational career. You are their advocate. And so stop letting these people call your children anything but a child of God under the sun because you're dysregulated and they're dysregulated. Hold them to a higher standard. So I think those are the two things for Black and Brown families that I really stress and that I really, when I meet with families, I really like edit that language that they use for their own children.
I think that's a great point of editing that language. I'm constantly looking through the language in IEPs, parent teacher anything they writing down. I'm looking at the language because you're not gonna sneak something in there on me for one, and two, they will. They will because they are perceiving your child to be that way. And a lot of times the terms that they're using are so broad. What do you mean by this? This could be anything. What is aggressive? Tell me what's aggressive. Explain it to me. Explain the exact behaviors. So I'm always going to ask for you to explain it in detail. You're just not going to use a broad term and think we all on the same page, because what's aggressive to you may not be aggressive to me. And with Black
100%.
children, they're often using subjective things to equate and put us in these categories anyway.
100%. 100%.
Can you talk about some of the red flags in school communication or IEPs that families should watch out for and how they can push back against this?
Yeah, so one of the red flags is I support a lot of families this year that they weren't even given an option for IEP meetings. And I thought that was very interesting. So we would talk and they would say, I do have a meeting coming up. It's on this date. Okay, we're setting up and we're going through my whole process. And then we get to talking and they're like, yeah, I'm like, not really, that's kind of a hard day for me. Da, 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 da. And I'm like thinking, well, why did you choose that day? So I'm like, well, is there a reason why you chose the day? Like, I didn't choose that day. They don't ever let me choose the day. So, oh, what's that now? So a red flag is absolutely when they're just like, this is your child's date. I see it a lot especially with 504s, but with IEPs, yeah, I see that. So red flag is if they are just telling you this is the date. If you get to the meeting and a person that is supposed to be in attendance could not attend and you were not made aware. I've had that happen where right before the meeting, my client is getting an email, they forward it to me. They're like, wait a minute, I thought the speech therapist was going to be there. Now, this situation in particular, the speech therapist has sent her things ahead of time. She had told the parent they could talk on the phone and meet. So there was things that she checked on her side. However, the language, the necessity of her being there for this learner was that this learner's category is based in her speech and language. So everything the SLP did, which is speech language pathologist, carried out throughout her entire IEP. So, and I felt she was an integral piece of this IEP team. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, but I have so many families that are just like, yeah, we had the meeting and like the OT couldn't make it. We had the meeting and they're like, but I didn't know and I had questions and I didn't feel like this was addressed. So that's the second red flag, is like you not being aware of who's going to be there. So I don't care what state you're in. You are supposed to be notified if a staff member can't be there. And then the criteria around that now might be different for your state. So some states, you have to sign a paper saying they can't be there. Some states, you have to give written permission for them to not be there. So check your state's laws. But that's another red flag that I see that is becoming more common. And I think the third one would be a lack of collaboration in the meeting. Now, I need a draft. I need to see it beforehand. So much so that my kid's school, she was like, I know you're going to want to make some edits. So I was just wondering if you could let me know what you're thinking before I even send you the draft. And then we can collaborate on the draft. Because she's like, I know what's coming, right? But there's some states where they're required to send you a draft in 48 hours, right? That's not really enough time to look at it. So, we don't really get into, again, I'm not an attorney, but we don't really get into like that legal side of it. But I do tell some of my clients, hey, your state does require them to send you a draft.
Mhm.
And then also another thing that parents don't know is that if you get to a meeting and they have a draft prepared and they haven't sent it to you, some states don't have a timeline for sending the draft, but they say that they can't prepare a draft and
Gotcha.
show it to you at the meeting without having sent it to you. So you have a right to say, no, I need to think on this. I need to review this. I need to discuss this with an advocate. I need to whatever. You don't have to sign it right there. So those are my big three red flags that I see.
I'm team draft as well. These schools know though. They're like, oh, we know you and your attorney are gonna want a draft 5 days out, and you're right. So let's make sure that we have that. But you bring a good point about the 504 meetings because our youngest twin has a 504 plan. The other two have IEPs. And the second year of her 504, I was waiting and waiting for the meeting. And I was like, we're getting really close to the end of the year. Let me see what's going on here. So I'm emailing the guidance counselor because in our district, guidance counselors handle 504s. And I'm saying, hey, she hasn't had her meeting. I want to see what's going on. And she was like, oh, we already did it. Did it with who? She's like, no, we already did it. She has the same stuff and it's already been submitted. Uh,
Did they
I,
not know you?
I said, I got no. Oh, we don't have to do any of that. So you can have a 504 meeting without me, submit everything. I don't even know what's on this plan. And you
Yeah.
think that's okay? You will be
Mm-hmm.
hearing from my attorney because at this point I don't even have nothing else to say to you because obviously the next words that coming in my out of my mouth are things that's not going to be nice because I don't understand why you would even think that that was all right. You didn't even send me a copy when you were done with it. I had to email you and then you sent it to me. So yeah, the schools will do things out here. And if you are not up on game, they will take it, even if you're up on game, because I do this for a living.
Mm-hmm.
They will still try to take advantage of you. You have to stay on them. And it's more work for us, but at the end of the day, we gotta do what we gotta do for our children.
100%. In Georgia, they have it so that their 504 guidelines are that they expect the schools to follow the same process as IEPs. So I would say that is one benefit that we do have, is that the Georgia Department of Education does have it set up where it says like they expect for you to invite the parent, they expect for you to notify the parent. But because it's still not IDEA, right? It's still not IEP, that's where I get a lot of the like, your meeting's on the say, oh, we have to change it because of this, and there's just no notification there, and we're gonna make this adjustment at the meeting. So, they still do those things. And both of my children have IEPs, but for the families I support, I have seen where they still do those things, even though they're like technically following, right? Because they're notifying you of the meeting. But again, no say, you just show up, and they kind of run it like we're doing a parent teacher conference. And it's like,
That's how it's ran here. Cause I'm like, I don't know what kind of funny business y'all got going on over here. But this is very weird. I don't know what I feel like y'all are playing with me. I don't know what's going on here. It was very odd. The whole experience of that was very odd. And I was like, I don't understand why you think this is okay. Like you really think that you should be able to do this without input from me, input from her, and y'all just sat here and made all these decisions. You don't know if something's working or not. Like you haven't asked. You're assuming.
and that's my favorite thing is as they get older, they'll start saying, well, I spoke with them. They said that they don't want this or they don't want that. Okay, well, I want to speak to my child. I
Mhm.
want to have that conversation. I want to see what their body language is showing and how they're really feeling about it, or if they're just complying because you're an adult.
Mhm.
But we know that as autistics, we know that as Black and brown individuals. Like, so yeah, that's another thing that annoys me when they say that. Like, well, they said they don't use this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to check with them and you're going to leave that in there. And
Exactly.
then I'll let you know if you can take it out.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I'm like, well, if this is a different school year, we only let her get into the school year and then we'll see if she needs it. Because we're going up in grades, things are getting harder. Like she may not think she needs it now, but she get over there and then she like, oh, I really do need that extra time. Stop playing with me. I triggered myself thinking about that situation. Let me move on along here. So many of us, especially Black women, are navigating mental health challenges that often go undiagnosed or are misunderstood. Can you talk about the connection between neurodivergence and mental health and some of the overlap? Because I know you talk a lot about the co-occurring diagnosis.
Yeah, so in general, I always tell people when we look back at all my degrees are in psych. Me and Maria are both mental health professionals. So when I talk about DSM-5 TR, she knows what I'm talking about. That's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the text revision, and that is where diagnoses come from. So if your child has been diagnosed with autism, that is where their diagnosis came from. Please remember, schools don't diagnose. They categorize. So they look at categories, they look at criteria, and then they say your learner needs this while they're in the school setting, but that does not transfer outside the school setting. And so there's a lot of overlap with autism and ADHD. There's a lot of overlap with autism and anxiety. There's a lot of overlap with autism and OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is OCPD. And I think that one of the things that I think is important when we're talking to the Black and Brown community is to recognize that there's a lot of things that prevent your child from getting the diagnosis when they need it and prevent you as an adult from getting the diagnosis if you so choose to seek it out. You have to have access to the evaluator. You have to have access to a culturally competent evaluator. If you are a girl or a woman or LGBTQ, you have to have access to a competent evaluator who has evaluated girls, women, and LGBTQ. There's all this beautiful word that Maria introduced to me years ago now. Intersectionality. Intersectionality plays such a role in your access to services. And so there's so many co-occurring pieces and you have to find the right fit. And that is why like oppositional defiant disorder and chronic disorder are two disorders that I have never diagnosed. I don't think should be diagnosed, especially ODD. ODD is really, so that's the oppositional defiant disorder, is really essentially not complying with adult directives. That is the gist of that diagnosis. And we are finding that a lot of Black and Brown children, especially boys, are diagnosed as ODD when they're really autistic. Okay. And they are responding in a way that coordinates with their brain and their thought process. And we're not teaching them emotional regulation and we're not giving them the skills to communicate. Same with ADHDers. We're finding that they're being diagnosed with ODD when really they're ADHD, but it presents in that more quote unquote defiant way because they're questioning things and they're challenging things and they have a different way of doing things and their brain thinks differently. So for the Black and Brown community, I always say, question the diagnosis, question what it means. You can get a second opinion. You can go sit in the office until they respond, like Maria did.
Exactly. I wasn't leaving.
But it's just important that you look at your child as a whole, right? Because sometimes it's not the autism, it's the anxiety. Sometimes it's not the anxiety, it's that he's 9 years old. Like sometimes, and then as hormones come into play and transition and change and schools and other adults and peer interactions. So just really learning about, the diagnosis as a whole, but then taking and looking at what actually applies to my child and then supporting them and advocating for them as a whole, I think is really important when you talk about that mental health overlap.
I love that. And one thing that I see that there are not enough trauma-informed clinicians because they do not even think how trauma plays a role, especially when it comes to Black students. Like the ACE score for most Black individuals is fairly high. So when they don't take trauma into consideration, when they don't take that background of what could be helping with these behaviors, what could be fueling these behaviors, that's another way that we get misdiagnosed because a lot of times that oppositional defiance is trauma. I do not ever want to see oppositional defiance on a kid's diagnosis because children by and far they don't have fully formed brains for one. Of course they're not going to listen. They are trying to push the boundaries to see what is going on. That's how they're learning. And when we're saying, oh, nope, When I say jump, you better say how high. And if not, you're oppositional defiant. That's where I'm going to take issue time and time again.
Yes, and it is developmentally appropriate, which is the irony of school settings who are not set up developmentally appropriately for children, is that's developmentally appropriate to say no. It's developmentally appropriate to push the boundary. It's developmentally appropriate to side with peers over adults, to choose peers over adults in decision making. So it's like when you want to get into what's appropriate, because that's a favorite thing they love to do, that is appropriate. Same with I don't subscribe to the emotional behavioral disturbance or emotionally disturbed category for Black and Brown learners, because 9 times out of 10 they're autistic or ADHD and should be under the autism or the other health impairment category. And so anytime eligibility comes up, immediately no. Anytime it's like that was previously on there and now I'm coming in, immediately no. We're going to put it under other health impairment and then we're going to call it what it is.
Exactly. I'm ready to knock stuff off the table when I see that EBD, because it's a throwaway category. And mostly it's because they are not culturally responsive practitioners and they do not understand how our Blackness comes in the room with us. And because of that, and because how society has shaped us, oftentimes they can't get over that hump to see what's going on beneath the surface to give a proper diagnosis. It's a throwaway category for Black and Brown children, and that is what gets me, because I don't want to see it. Don't come over here telling me. And then if you want to get real, I am a licensed clinician. There's not too many of us in this room who can diagnose if you really want me to throw my weight around here.
That part, I was told that my son was I've been in the special education field for 13 years. I've never seen someone like your son. So you really should consider that he's oppositional defiant. And I said, I'm the only one in this room that can diagnose.
Exactly.
And I said, and if y'all call my son ODD one more time, and I left it there. And I just looked. And afterwards, my husband said, I think you handled that very well. Because what I was going to say was, I'm going to scream and come across his table.
Okay.
But I didn't say that.
You left it open. You fill the blank in.
Right.
You fill the blank in.
You
and
take in what you think that means.
You let me know. I'm gonna leave it at that, because they will try it like that. Like it really, like, why you are not a clinician? I don't even know. First of all, ODD shouldn't even be talked about here in the school, since y'all don't diagnose. You categorize. I was saying, what word was I saying? I was saying one of the learning disabilities, dyslexia. I kept saying dyslexia, and then we don't diagnose, we categorize. Well, ma'am, I'm going to call it what it is, because I know what it is, but we know that you don't diagnose around here, okay? But I am an actual clinician, so I'm going to say what it is. That's just habit, but I know. But then you want to come here and say ODD? Which one is it? Which one is it? Make it make sense. Oh my goodness. As someone who is constantly out here advocating as their job and has to advocate within their home and take care of their own mental health, how do you make space for your own mental health and joy? How do you find that balance?
So I started a few years ago where I would make like a list of things I was no longer going to accept as I headed into my next birthday, and things that I wanted to do. And as I've gotten older and built up my businesses and things like that, there's been a lot more travel included in that. And so for me, part of that is setting aside time and not violating those boundaries. I think that is a really difficult thing to do when you are a business owner, when people are like, oh, can you meet? Can you do that? And you're like, well, I can, but like I have to preserve my mental health. I am autistic and ADHD too. I have to stave off burnout. I have to do what I need to do to still be functional and present. Not just as a wife and a mother, but as an individual. So setting boundaries, finding joy in things that I want to do. Like I started getting my nails done again about this, maybe almost a year ago now, and I hadn't done that in a while. And I was like, but I really enjoy it. So I was like, let me do that. And then, when I'm at home, my kids kind of know, like, I love to read. So I'll be reading a book. They'll come lay next to me. They'll have their tablets and their headphones on. So it's just like parallel play. And because they know like mommy's reading a book. And so we're not going to disrupt her reading a book, but we want to lay with her. And so I still get to be next to them. They still get that comfort in while I'm still doing something I enjoy. Because I want to be acknowledge that everything is going up. Prices are going up. So I don't want to make it seem like you got to use money to enjoy. But I think really just finding things to do that I enjoy. Personally, things that I want to do with my family. Like I was like, oh, I want to spend more time with my parents because I live 30 minutes from them now. So I've like randomly take my dad out to lunch and randomly took my mom out to lunch and just like spent time with them. I think that's the way you protect your mental health is find out like what things bring you joy and then do more of that. Sometimes I'll tell my kids like, I'm not going anywhere today. Don't ask me to go anywhere today. You can come lay with mommy all you want to, but I'm gonna lay in this bed and I'm only getting up to eat. And they're like, okay.
That's my type of party too.
Because it's like we have to rest. And I think a key moment for me where that came about was there was like I was really staving off burnout. And I spent 2 days in a row where I just laid. And my son actually said, Mommy, you're resting. I'm so proud of you.
Wow.
And I was like, okay.
Hmm.
So I need to make more time to rest. And even now, they'll say little things like, Mommy, you seem so tired. I think you need to take a break. And so, one, I always say to parents, like, tell my class, kudos to you, right? Because we're teaching them that you deserve to rest, you deserve to break. But also, they're mirroring back to me what I say when I tell them, you're tired, you need a nap, you need rest. So I think that's how I really do that is setting those boundaries, finding those things that are enjoyable and, taking time to rest.
I love that. Rest is so important. My kids will often be like, Mommy, you seem stressed. Are you overwhelmed? And I'm like, these are true therapist kids.
That's what that is. My kids' school says that too. They're like, you can tell your kids have a therapist as a mom.
Yeah, they're checking in. And oftentimes they are spot on. And one thing I had to really get out of is the guilt I feel for the burnout I have after the conference. Because after the conference, I am no good for a couple weeks. I can't do nothing. I just want to rest. I want to sit and watch Netflix. I want to not think. But I will guilt myself like you need to do something. This is the time people are still conversating about your conference, are still wanting. And so it's the balance, especially as a solopreneur and owning your business and things like that. It's like, oh my God, this is the time people are talking about it. They just had a great time, but I can't physically do anything. So having to be okay with that and get through that guilt is something that I, even as a therapist, am working on. And it's hard, but you have to do it because burnout is real.
And I think like the piece that we like neither one of us really mentioned in that capacity because we are Black women and this is a podcast for Black women and however you identify is that the Black community that is a very common thing.
Yes.
It is very common to just push through and specifically speaking to our Black and brown mothers like we just have this capacity that is unheard of. And sometimes we don't respect that capacity is depleting and we don't pour into ourselves and we don't feel like we can rest, right? Because we've always been told you have to keep. And I, as personally someone who attended the Autism Black Conference in person this year, seeing the engagement and interaction and, the prep at least what I assume was all the prep, you coming in looking as gorgeous as you were looking, and Dr. Barry and stuff, right? Like that whole time is exhausting. And like, especially for, again, autistics, like neurodivergent folks, like that social battery. So, I think that part of that is we want to help. And so that's why we create our businesses and we put these things out there. But also, we have to look at our intersectionality and look at what history has told us and separate from that and go, like, it's okay for me to disconnect and for me to rest. Because if I don't, I can't do things like this.
Exactly. Look at Dr. Huff pouring into me on the Autism and Black podcast. Thank you for that because I needed that. That's why you need community. because
Exactly.
she just checked me and I'm going to receive it. I am receiving that. Thank you. As we end up, tell the people where they can find you, how they can locate you. Dr. Huff's Instagram is where it's at, okay? She is constantly posting amazing things. I'm learning too. So I'll be like, oh, I didn't know this one. So please tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram under Destiny Huff _ IEP _ advocate. I also have my Facebook connected to that. Sometimes things don't end up on Facebook that are on Instagram, but my Facebook is Destiny Huff Consulting. And then my website is www.destinyhuffconsulting.com. I, offer a variety of free resources and webinars and things like that. And then you obviously can always catch me on something related to autism in Black or the Black Collective Advocacy Network. I'm constantly collaborating with Maria and Cheryl Poe. So those are the many places you guys can find me.
Thank you. And you do have your own summit that is coming up as well.
Yes. So I do the virtual neuroaffirming IEP summit. And it is exclusively coming from a neuroaffirming standpoint. I do part 1 in September and I do a part 2 in March. And I'm super excited because this is my second year doing it. And this go around, I got some friends joining me, like Miss Maria Davis Pierre, Miss Cheryl Poe. But I also reached out to individuals that we're in the same advocacy space, and I may not have the confidence before to be like, hey, would you mind? And so I've got a great lineup. So starting in July, you'll start seeing more of who's going to be doing what and when. So I'm really excited about that. And again, it's neuroaffirming, specifically focused on special education. So we get into the weeds of inclusion practices and we get into the weeds of supporting Black and Brown learners from a neuroaffirming lens, speech, OT, all those wonderful things.
So you guys need to be there is what she is saying. Thank you, Dr. Huff, for blessing us today. This has been amazing. I want to give you your flowers because it's so important for me to do that. I truly enjoy anytime we are around one another. I enjoy every time you're speaking. I learn so much. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode.